Well, hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Young with Brownfield, and I want to thank all of you so much for coming out this afternoon. Succession planning is an important topic today. The average age of farmers is somewhere north of 58 years old. Baby boomers are stepping out of their tractor cabs or their combines for the last time and turning the keys to the kingdom over to the next generation. There are numerous resources available to guide farmers and industry through the business and legal, the financial end of the transition, but there's another aspect to succession planning that no one really talks about. The emotional stress can be at the least troublesome and at the worst damaging to your health. In this session, Beyond the Paperwork, Navigating the Emotional Stress of Succession Planning, we hope to get that conversation started. Thank you, Sipcam Agro, for recognizing the importance of the emotional side of succession planning and sponsoring this session. Our panelists today have all experienced similar yet unique challenges in navigating the stress of tough family conversations during the transition from one generation to the next. Our panelists today, and I will introduce them and then they will tell you a little bit about themselves in just a minute. But I would first like to welcome NADIA GAGLIARDINI with Sipcam Agro. She's the third generation and owner president. Next is Jason MEDOWS with JM Land and Cattle from Cuba, Missouri. Next to him is John WHATLEY with J&K WHATLEY Farms from Odom, Texas. And then Brandon HUNNICUTT with HUNNICUTT Farms in Giltner, Nebraska. And rounding out our panel is Patty Leonard with Cows and Corn, Haunted Hollow from Midland, Texas. Now, Virginia. Oh, I'm sorry. How did I get Midland, Texas? Oops, I knew that. She is from Virginia. She'll tell you more about that in a minute. So what I'd like to do now is have each of the panelists tell a little bit about themselves, and we'll start with NADIA.
Good afternoon, everybody. Is it working?
It is.
I'm very happy to have the chance and the opportunity to talk about this important aspect of our business. We are a family company. We are Italian. We were founded in 1946 by my grandfather, and we supply the farmers. We work in the agrochemical field since we were born, and now we have enlarged our business. We have our company here, and so the family ownership and the family business is something we feel very familiar. I'm the third, so as you know, there is a saying, the first one builds, the second one expands, and the third destroy. But today I'm still here, and the company is growing, and we are happy and look forward to our American business to grow and flourish, to supply and to support. Our sentence is supporting agriculture.
And I'm Jason MEDOWS from Cuba, Missouri, and we haven't gone through it yet, but we're in the transition period from my father, who started everything. I was telling everybody earlier, my father started with an 8th grade education, and that's it. He actually used to joke. He said he went all the way through high school. He went through the front door and out the back. But so my dad, he went from nothing. My folks had zero electricity when they were married in 1958, and he started working for IPLA out of Peoria, Illinois, as a sale-borne contractor, and IPLA went out of business sometime in the 70s. I can't remember the time, and he took over the business, and he ran an interstate livestock market for a good 20 years. We have a cow-calf operation in south central Missouri in the Ozarks. Unfortunately, my dad's health is declining. He is 84 years old, and my mother is strong as a rock, but she is feeling the stress of trying to keep everything together. And we are having an incredibly hard time talking about this in my family. It's, I think, just the generational difference. I'm the youngest of 5. I have brothers and sisters in 3 different generations. Baby boomers, Generation X, and I'm the millennial, so I'm the baby. And it's an incredibly difficult thing to be talking about this transition. And we are experiencing quite a bit of stress with my dad not wanting to let go and not wanting to move it on down the line. And we are all very, and it's another thing that's another difficult is even talking about it, because we don't want to be talking about death, even though it's inevitable. But we just want to know that everything is secure and where it needs to be.
I'm John Whatley. I am a farmer south of here, about 120 miles on the Gulf Coast, right outside of Corpus Christi. I'm a 4th-generation farmer and rancher in that area. We grow corn, grain sorghum, and cotton. We have a cow-calf operation. I'm also a partner in a Purina-branded feed store. So we like to think we're a little diversified, but in each diversity has its own issues of transition and succession. We are 4 years post-transition in my family farm. My dad is 84, and we completed the process when he turned 80. Started it at probably 72. So when I say transition, I've always said, and he and I have joked, it's not a hostile takeover, it's a transition. You don't walk in one day and say, here's your truck, get in the truck, walk out the door, goodbye. That's not what we did. And that's what happens too many times, in my view, is it needs to be a transition. You put your heart and soul in it. I don't want somebody to walk in and tell me one day you're done, goodbye. So we created a process. It was probably about a 14-month negotiating process, and as y'all all know, it's not easy to negotiate with your father, and if my dad was sitting here to say, it's probably not real easy to negotiate with your son. Mm-hmm. But we did it with communication, we did it with love and respect, and we knew in the end that what our goal was, it was just filling out the details in the middle.
I'm Brandon Hunnicott. I'm from Geltner, Nebraska. I farm there with my brother, and dad's transitioning out, but we farm corn, soybeans, popcorn, seed corn. We have a little bit in production that's in organic production as well. And, you know, it's been kind of an interesting situation from the transition side, but I got to see it from when Grandpa transitioned it to his 3 sons and his daughter, the daughter who doesn't farm, but I saw that whole process come about, and at the same time, I was old enough that I was out. I was in college, but I got to see probably the bad side of some things, even though it looked at the core like it was good. So we'll fast forward now to 2020, and just the quick story is last year in August, Dad goes, "Hey, I gotta don't leave the shop. I got something. I gotta go get something." So he comes out and he hands us a letter, and he says he's going out of the day-to-day operations of the farm. And what we found out, going back to communication thing, is the lack of communication was my brother and I assumed one thing, and apparently Dad assumed something else. And so now we're in the process of really trying to say, okay, what the heck is going on? What does this mean? So we're working with a company that we work with quite regularly to say, okay, we've got to get this figured out, because we need to know, we need to be able to plan. We need to figure out what's going forward. And to make it even a little more messy in the whole process is that process started then about a month and a half ago. My cousin quit farming with my uncle, so my uncle sold his farm, and we didn't buy any of it, but there's some ground that's in the family, and we're not exactly sure how that lays out. And so my grandma's, 90, and what happens when she passes on, and where does that ground go? And now all of a sudden, how are we going to we're in the process of a transition. We're in the process of trying to figure out, are we going to have to buy that ground? What are we going to do? And when we started this panel discussion, when we started discussing this, I think my brother and I kind of had a plan laid out in our minds. And I'm afraid things have gotten thrown into a whole in disarray in the last couple of days because about 2 days ago we found out my brother-in-law apparently had a heart attack and died, and so my sister, who doesn't farm, she'll probably have to. My guess is she's going to move back to our area, and we don't know what. And we haven't even sat down to discuss this because I've been out here when this happened. And so how does that change this whole process? So all of a sudden, we thought we had a plan going forward. Ish, and now I don't know what we have going forward because I don't know how Dad's going to respond to some of that as well, and how that's going to take it on. So all of a sudden, everything I came here to discuss, I realized walking over here is just kind of in no man's land now.
Well, my name is Patty Leonard, and I am from Virginia, 45 miles southwest of Washington, D.C., and our story, or my story, started in the 80s. My grandparents had bought land with money they had gotten when they sold their farm right next to Dulles Airport, and they moved to the countryside to start over again. So they bought it for $200 an acre. In the mid-'80s, I was married, had 2 kids, had married a dairy farmer. He got me and 10 cows. And it went from our little family farm of 200 acres to marrying into a farm of 300 cows and 2,000 acres and a subchapter S corporation. 2 very different setups. I started working before kids. I worked at our local bank trust department. And I saw what was happening when people were dying and their wills were being read and their houses were being separated by the attorneys in the trust departments. The tax assessment came out in the mid-'80s, and we were surprised, I was shocked, to find out that my grandparents' farm had gone from $200 an acre to $88,000 an acre. And in that time period, you could only pass to the next generation $1.2 million. So I said to my grandmother, and I'm pretty bold, I put it out there. I went to my grandmother one night and I said, I called her Momo. I said, do you have a will? Oh yeah, we have a will. I said, who's the executor? The county attorney, or the local attorney. I said, do you know that, I said, why isn't my mother, the only child, your executor? Well, she can't do that. Oh, yes, Mom can. She can hire an attorney to help her. But I said, let me ask you a question. I said, what happens in 9 months when the IRS expects a big payment? What happens when that attorney gets 6%? What happens when that attorney comes into this house and he's going to say, well, this has got to go here, this has got to go here, this has got to go here? The kicker was there was a gun from the Civil War that my great-great-grandpap had. And I said, if you don't have in the will that my brother gets that gun, it's going to be sold. I got her attention. And that was the beginning of the transition for us. I won't take up any more time, but I will say that we have successfully done this from on my side, my grandparents, to my mother, to my brother and I. And on my husband's side, we have gone from his grandparents to his parents, bought out a brother, and now it lies in my husband's hand. And what's the kicker for me? I have 3 daughters. We are no longer milking 300 cows. We are no longer farming 2,000 acres, not where we expected to be 20 or 30 years ago. And now I have 3 daughters, 2 still, 1 on the farm, 1 semi on the farm, and 1's moved out of the state. And we're being asked these questions of, what are you gonna do?
Thank you all for your stories. And I see, as I look out at you, I see a lot of head shaking, some of this up and down and some of this. So I know that many of you have similar experiences at some point. I also have special interest in this panel today. My husband and I live on a farm in mid-Missouri that we purchased 20 years ago. but I am one of 4 siblings representing the 7th generation on a family farm in west central Illinois. So there are a lot of us out there that have similar stories and a lot of questions, I know. And that's what I want to do now, is open up for questions. And there are a couple of ways that you can do this. If you are in the audience, you can, and you want this to be anonymous, you can, on your phone, just type in sli.do and use the code on the screen. It's all explained up there. Or raise your hand, and Adam will bring you the microphone. If you're listening via live radio, social media, you can tweet at Brownfield or at Brownfield is good. You can do that. So to begin with, do we have any questions from the audience to get things started? Okay, I will just kick off with one. How in the world do you separate the emotion from the business? And we'll start with Nadia.
To separate emotion from the business is really difficult, because our business is also made with a lot of passion and emotion. But what I think is very important is that as a family leader, as the founder or the leader of the family, you have really the responsibility to be able to detach from the business, which is your family business, your family, because otherwise making mistakes, and we heard some, not thinking in advance, not preparing your children, not choosing between your children, not giving them the opportunity to tell if they are interested or not, you run the risk to jeopardize your business. So it's a big responsibility that you have to do with a lot of attention, not to create a wrong expectation, but also creating an environment that can help your children to express the talents, and for you to choose and let everybody understand maybe not everybody is good for the business. That's for the sake of the business.
And that's not an easy thing to do.
I think a big thing for me, and this is personally, when I'm talking to my folks, and I've honestly just now come to realize this, that I have to say beforehand who's talking. Am I the son who just wants to be around their parents and just it be a non-business conversation, or are we talking business right now? Am I putting on the hat as the person who is looking to take things to a different level or change things in some way? For the last couple of, and I'll be honest here because I've made these mistakes so many times, the last couple of months being actually, setting out and telling them this is what we're talking about, not mixing at dinner, not mixing it at Christmas, just having sit-down conversations, and family time is family time, and business time is business time.
It's how do you separate the emotion? You don't, plain and simple. There's no way to take the emotion and leave it. So how do you address that? Well, you're talking about two very emotional things. Number one, somebody, if you're talking from my dad's point of view, something that he's done his entire life. He's tied to the land. He's tied to the equipment. He's tied to the animals. So how do and then the other super emotional thing, money, and we can all say it's not, but when you're at that part of your career, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to continue the lifestyle that you have the rest of your life. So you don't separate the emotion. You have those two issues. So then, what do you do to make them better? One thing that Jason we did is when it was time to talk business, we talked business, and when it was time to go to dinner, we went to dinner and we didn't talk business. We separated that. So we had family and we had business. We laugh in my family. My dad's love language is supper, to go to dinner. He likes to go to dinner. He wants to take everybody to dinner. He wants to buy everybody dinner. That's what he loves to do. So when we did those things, we didn't talk business. But the one key thing I would tell you that would help with the emotion of it is hire professionals. If most of us in this room got accountants, go to your accountant, talk to your accountant. There's ways to there's ways to be creative and to make the buyout, and you hear it from a nonpartisan person that's doing it strictly from a business end. Hire a consultant, hire somebody you trust, that both parties trust, to help you separate the emotion, because it's there. It doesn't matter what you try, it's there.
You actually stole most everything I was going to say right there, because I was going to say you can't separate the emotion, because going back, the emotion builds up from the previous transition into, if Grandpa transitioned it to Dad, and now he's built up that emotion, then you're trying to build it all in together. But you work with them on a daily basis. You're around them, you see them, and trying to say, okay, how are we going to do it? And that's why we ultimately just reached out to the partners that we're working with and said, okay, we need to have a meeting. We need to put something down, and we need it going into this growing season. We need to at least get a plan in place. And because we realized we were going to get nowhere, if it was my brother and I trying to do it directly with Dad, or if we have to bring Mom in as well. We really didn't want the battle royale of, my brother and I and my sister and against Mom and Dad, because we knew that was a bad idea. So yeah, we had to reach out and find somebody else.
Definitely, we involved a professional. We even got an attorney that was out of town, so that we knew that he wasn't going to be talking about our business when he went to lunch with his buddies. But we got an attorney from out of town, and he brought to us a whole different set of tools. But when it came to the emotional part, sometimes I think it's a catalyst to start the conversation. And with what Zach was experiencing with just losing somewhat in his generation, that was kind of it was brought up in our discussion that not only are you making the transition plan or estate plan for the older generation, you're making it for every generation, because you never know what can happen. So we were sitting there talking to our parents and grandparents and saying, we have kids now, we're going to make a plan to take care of them, but we need to know what we need to be planning for. And they were all for planning to make sure those 3 little girls were going to be cared for. So they understood we were being responsible, and it was the emotions and was the catalyst to start the conversation for us, especially on my husband's side.
I have a lot of questions here, so I'm just going to start. What are some of the mistakes that you have made, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, the mistakes that we have made at the beginning was to try to consider everybody good to do the job, which brings a lot of, how would I say, then a business problem becomes a family problem, because there is no way back when you take a wrong decision with somebody that you live with, or is your father or your children. So this is one of the most common mistakes. And the other one is sometimes to have, in a different manner, a less professional evaluation of the children or of your parents, because you tend to think that your children and your parents are apt to do the job, while sometimes it's good to have a third opinion or a different experience before entering the company, in order to avoid, to discover later that this is not the right way, the right solution for the company. So these are the 2 major. And if I may add, I believe also another mistake you do is, again, there is a lot of mixing between the different interests of the people, and you cannot make everybody happy.
And that's a hard one. Yeah. Cannot make everybody happy.
I think for us in our situation is the complete lack of communication That's the biggest mistake I think that has been made, and no one's to blame, and everyone's to blame. You know, I want to, you know, excuse me. My goal is to secure the legacy and secure what's going to happen going forward. So that is my number one concern. No, I take that back. It's my number two concern. My number one concern is that my mother and father live out their days happy. And that's incredibly hard to do when they are having a very hard time letting go of the place and kind of letting control of that go to the next generation. So I think to just wrap it up is the lack of communication is our number one mistake.
We were very fortunate that we were able to communicate very well, but the biggest mistake that I made was probably at times wanting the process to go too fast. I'm a very impatient person, and I wanted to hurry through the process, not necessarily once we had the plan in place. I wanted to hurry up to have the plan. And so at times I pushed my dad too hard, and instead of, when I think, my mouth engages. When my dad thinks, he gets quiet. I wanted him to engage his mouth and tell me what he was thinking. Two personalities, two different things. So my biggest mistake was impatience. Allow him to process it. Now that I'm gotten a little bit older, I don't know about wiser, but a lot more grayer, that I understand how that process, because you're not going from what your next career move is. You're going from your career is over. You're moving to another total aspect of your life. And my mistake was I pushed him at the start of it too hard, too fast.
You know, it looks like there's a common theme here of communication, and I think from my brother Zach and I's standpoint, it took us a long time to realize that there was a communication gap, and it was somewhat with our dad, but we were each getting fed certain information at certain times, and so the whole process has allowed us to realize that, okay, we need to communicate with each other, because if Dad would tell him one thing, but not me, and vice versa, we were just getting upset at each other. And then once we realized that was happening, it makes us realize that even though we still have a communication issue there, going from Dad to us, hopefully not from us to Dad, but I'm sure that's there. He would say the same thing, but that we can try to work this forward and try to make sure that we're on the same page and that we're not communicating poorly back to Dad as well.
So far, our succession plan, we think, has been successful. But going back, I think what we should have done would give us a better understanding is to think outside the box of all the different possibilities. Never 20 or 30 years ago when we were doing all this, we were going to continue to be farmers. We were going to continue milking cows. We only had one vision. And we never visioned another world where we weren't farming, and we sold our cows in 2018. We're now Christmas tree farmers. We're now agritainment. We're now haunting. That's why it's Cows and Corn and Haunted Hollow. So and we had a Christmas walkthrough this year. We're doing things that we never would have imagined. So we were all focused, and all the plan was, if the plan was to be farming. We didn't think about how the plan was going to be if we weren't farming. And that is a big thing in today's world. And again, we still have generations. We still want to keep the land, but it's not going to be growing corn and soybeans and milking cows.
So
Do you mind if I just want to
jump right in
on what he said about the lateral communication among the next generation? That may be even more crucial than the communication from the father and mother down to the children. Is is going side to side with your siblings and knowing what they know and what they may not know. I think that's been a big problem with us, is not everyone's on the same page. I, being the baby, am around mom and dad a lot more than everybody else. You know, our grandkids or their grandkids are younger, our kids, so they're spending a lot more time. Everyone else's kids are grown or almost grown. So we have a lot better grasp of what's going on with mom and dad than maybe my older siblings do, just because of our being close to them. So and I feel like that's on me a lot, is I have not done a great job of communicating what is actually going on with mom and dad, because the others just haven't been around as much. I mean, we all live close, but I think everybody in this room can agree you get busy and some things kind of go to the wayside, and we're no different. And me not communicating with my brothers and sisters has been a big mistake for me.
Another question here. A couple of you said hire professionals, get professionals involved. Someone in the audience asked if there are resources to turn to, or that you turn to, when checking the legal advice that you receive from lawyers regarding transitioning farmland.
I don't know of anybody that we check the advisors against, but I will say that the attorneys, we didn't, the key person to me was the tax accountant. And if you have a depreciable asset and you want to sell it to someone, there's only there's two values. There's your value and then the value the government says you have left in it. Mm-hmm. And that difference, because we know your value is much more than that, that difference is very expensive. And that creates major conflict in the buyout, in the final transfer and transition of money and assets changing hands. And so the tax accountant for us was pivotal, but you have to go beyond that. You have to get creative. You have to have think of things to do to make that value, your value, and what the government says your value of that, and the tax implications. There's ways to find that happy medium. And that's why it's important that we're using the word transition. And I believe a transition is not on this day this happens. That's a takeover. A transition is a process. It could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, it could be 5 years, which we did. And if you'll work with a professional, they will help design that buyout that is, let's be honest, if it was my kid, I want it to be good for them because I don't want to burden them. But I also don't want everything that they pay me that I have to turn around and write to the government. You can't. That's your retirement. That's your history. So you take these professionals and you try to find a happy medium, but you have to be creative. And there is lots of tools available. But as far as how to check it, I don't know who I would use to double check that resources.
Yeah, really the organization we've used is I'm not gonna say they're a one-stop shop, but they're a large enough organization that they'll cover everything. So we've never checked against them. I guess kind of with the trust that they know what they're doing if they've stayed in business this long.
Anyone else?
I was just going to say the same thing about the tax accountant and the attorney. Our attorney was specialized in farm transition. So it wasn't somebody that didn't understand about farming. So he specialized in that. But the compliment was the tax attorney, that something would be brought up, and they would say, well, you can do it this way. And then the other one said, well, you can do it this way. And then they said, okay, let's research and find out what would be the best way for us to do it. And what you were talking about, in that case, what they did on the dairy part when we were transitioning is they did a special use valuation that valued the business's ability to make money. Now, if anybody's been a dairy farm, you know that lowered it, because we were dealing again with high land values but the ability of the business to make money. It was a special use valuation. Had those two not been in the room at the same time, had we not been working with a team, then they came up with buy-sell agreements. Do you have to have a buy-sell agreement between siblings? Yes, because some are married, some are not married. And it all is determining who's going to end up working together. And with the buy-sell agreement, you might know who you're going to end up in business with. So professionals, definitely, but it sounds like the question was questioning the ethics, thank you, and there again, reach out, talk to somebody different, talk to somebody and get an outside opinion, but definitely the professionals, more than one.
Yes, if I may add, it's the same exactly for us. We have been working with the lawyers and with the, what would I say, tax accountant and commercial about the tax accountant, because one of the most nice or not nice, the more the children are, the more the property will be divided, so the more it will become complicated for the one who wants to run the business, how to run the business. So, as you said, it has been also for us this experience. We have find out what is the best way to transfer the company ownership between children and between the husband and wife, the parent. So it's a very technical matter, and if you're not prepared, as Patty said, when it happens, it can be a nightmare. It can kill your company. It's not a nice subject to talk about, but it is mandatory if you want to preserve your business in the future and your family.
Again, we are taking questions on Slido, but we'll take live questions as well. Can you get the microphone over here? I'm loud. But we need you to be on microphone so we can get a recording. Thank you.
Okay. Or is there another mic? Okay.
Talk.
Oh,
There you go.
whoa.
Yeah.
There we are. I work with elderly people as a physical therapist. And one thing that I notice is as they get older, one thing that's very depressing is they don't feel like they're contributing anymore, whether that's to society, their family, their farm, whatever it is. They don't feel like they have a purpose. And so sometimes finding a purpose, and John mentioned that it's been a transition, and I happen to know John. And so one of the things I want you to talk about, and then all of you, ways that you have found to allow the older person, whoever's moving out, to continue to be a part that makes them feel purposeful. Because we're talking about emotion, and I think that at least on the person going out, that's probably the hardest thing, is to let go of something that you've built and worked your behind off, from 8th grade on, and then you feel like you're not contributing, whether or not, like I know my dad was kind of similar. He was much older when he had us, and we ended up we had cattle. We put cattle guards throughout the entire place. I mean, it didn't matter if it was, yeah, exactly, so that he could continue to go and feed cows and check cows. So I would think maybe if y'all could give an example of things that you've done like that helps their emotional side of it.
So as far as I'm concerned, it happened in a different manner. I didn't think about succession. I didn't think about transition at all. And one day before the shareholder assembly, my father called me and says, it was a Friday, said, "Nadia, do we want to become president of the company?" And I said, "Dad, are you ill?" Because for my father, the company is everything. So I said, "Well, you have a problem?" And he told me, no, I'm really fine. I've been thinking about how you could become president of the company. One is when I'm dead, and the other one is when I'm alive, and check if you are capable to do it in a proper manner as I like. So for me, it's been very easy, because I keep on, we talk on daily basis with my father. I update on every decision. So with the time, of course, the time he can dedicate, the energy is inferior. But I think that in this, the family can really be one of the most capable to put all the possibility to make the transition smoother. Of course, it is important that the company has been their business, their life. And if they are so generous to help you to transition, the minimum you have to do is to, and then use competencies, because it's so useful to have somebody who loves you, gives you suggestions. Then you may challenge. But it is really how would I say, my father knows it's important for me, even if I take decision. And he doesn't, he never has the impression not to control completely the company.
So for us, I think finding things to do, and I hate to see this because I don't think of my father as an object. He's an incredible man and has been, he's been my best friend for my entire life. And, so to have to find some things for him to do is incredibly hard. But as you were saying, when he feels like he can contribute, that is when he is at his best. And for the last few years, he tried bale hay, and then he got to where he couldn't do that anymore. But we can put him on a tractor, and we can put him on the mower conditioner, and as long as it's an open field, he can go round and round. If there's not a lot of trees, we got a few of those big, Missouri, leading in the Ozarks. They're few and far between, but for the most part, our hay fields are pretty wide open. So I don't want to treat my father like a child because he has earned the right to not have that done to him.
Jason is exactly right. He's earned the right, just like I've always felt that my dad did. And as we did the transition and the transition came to the end, nothing changed except for he actually just came to work every day. And the one thing we did is I never bought him out of the cow-calf operation. He can't check cows, he can't get out, but he still owns those cows. Would it save me a lot of long-term headaches to have that situation taken care of now? Absolutely. Because I have two older sisters, which have been wonderful through the process. My sisters have been extremely helpful, and they get it. But I never asked for something at all during the whole process. I never asked for, well, I'm going to get a third of this one day, I should have a third now. That's not the way we approached it. We approached it from one businessman buying out another businessman. My portion of what I bought out will come someday, I hope, a long time from now. But to keep my dad involved, he's still part of the cow-calf operation. He can't get out there only when I take him, but I take him out there to show him the cows because he would sit out there for hours just watching them graze. And as Jason said, he deserves my respect I spent the first 20 years out of college, that's working with him every day. So the last 10 years have been really hard because they weren't what they were the first 20. Because we all know life transitions, and that's the way we want this transition to be positive. But what Gina said is very important that we do remember the emotional end of that, because it helps him, but it helps me as well.
I guess in my case, Dad's not terribly old, and I think he's gonna, he said he'll be around to do a bunch of things, and he already spends most of the time scooping out grain bins anyway, which, by the way, I don't complain one bit about. If he wants to be in there cleaning out grain bins, more power to him. I kind of picture he'll do the same thing my grandpa did, help for a few years, and basically say, enough of this. I'm going to go drink coffee, drive go-karts for the Shriners, and bowl. And so I'm in a little different situation where I don't have to worry about that yet, I don't think.
So with my grandmother, it was probably more of an emotional decision for her. And when we were doing this in 1989, we had a deadline of December 31st. We actually had to take the home farm and divide it into parcels, and it was generation skipping. My mother is an only child, And so to do it at that time, we had to skip generations. And so my mother got a parcel, my brother got a parcel, and I got a parcel. Now, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a household with 4 generations under one roof, so my grandmother, it was one living room versus another living room, same house. But I did tell my grandmother, first of all, I thanked her for doing this. And second of all, I promised her, I said, it's all the same piece of property. We're going to treat it all as a family. One is not going to run off and sell a piece to get the money. And I promised her, I said, I will never sell this unless my kids have cancer. And she was okay with that. But I promised her. And and the other thing, I explained to my grandmother, and my husband explained to his family, both of us respected the individual families enough that when we wrote our wills, my husband did not receive the part of the farm that went to him, and his shares of the farm did not go to me. So that if it happened young, they were never stuck farming with me, and my brother and mother was never with my husband, because who knows about the second wife, what was she going to be like? And so we respected each other's families enough and communicated that to our families so that they knew where we were coming from. So again, it's not just this generation or the older generation, it's all generations communicating the plan.
This is an interesting question that came in. Given the emotional difficulty of talking about mortality, has anyone used a therapist or a mental health professional as a facilitator?
No, we have not.
Anyone
Because
else?
we have, again, it's something where, like Patty said, is something that we have established without for the future. So it's something that is less emotional because it's already a past taken decision.
So, yes, I've been to counseling many times. I've taken it upon myself also to speak out and start talking about the importance of paying attention to your mental health as well, because it's something that affects all of us. It affects every single person in this room, whether or not you deal with anxiety or depression or anything. We all deal with some sort of uncertainty. We all deal with some sort of grief, especially when you're talking about the things we're talking about here. So yes, I have seen counselors, and I have. I'll feel like, if it's okay, appropriate to talk about what I do is I've started a podcast and a blog that is geared toward mental health and agriculture, and talking through these things with people and doing much of what we're doing here today is getting people with real life experience and talking about the kind of sometimes grueling things that emotionally can happen with this. And you saw in the bio a little bit, if you read it, that I'm a pharmacist as well as a cow-calf operator, and that was the best way for me to kind of join my two professions, if you will. And so yes, I suggest even if you don't think you may need a counselor, it probably is a good idea for everybody to see one. I can't even express that enough.
We did not. I probably, I leaned the hardest on my wife. I guess she was my counselor, so she probably needs counseling now. And then I think my dad probably did the same thing with my mom. And my mom was the Switzerland. She was the neutral ground in the family. I could talk to her. He could talk to her. And she was very good at seeing both sides of it. She understood, obviously, her end of the side was his end, but she understood from what she wanted her son's business to go to. So she got both sides of it, But those were probably who we used for counseling.
We didn't get a counselor, but I will say when the attorney, with his vast experience, having experience as a farm estate planner, he understood us. And he brought to the table the wisdom of working with families, seeing other situations. And so it kind of goes back to getting good professionals to help you.
Here's another question from the audience. What do you do when no one wants to take over the family business? Do you sell and lose it to taxes, or do you just split it between the kids?
We have taken a decision that whenever there will be not only a children interested, but a capable children to manage the business, we will split the rule from shareholder to management. So in our company, what we will do in our family is we have created a kind of trust where the children can be a shareholder, take the profit, and in that case, if no one from the family is capable or interested, it will be management to work for us. You will give to a third party, and we will keep the property.
Anyone else?
I don't have any.
Right, to keep it going. So, okay, here's another. Okay, we've got a couple over here. Hold on just a second. She's bringing the microphone.
So in 2012, I had an attorney friend tell me that business got a lot busier, and that was because land values tripled. And I think I appreciate the transition. I have a son myself and 2 daughters, and I think this is supposed to be a psychological or talk. That's just the tip of the iceberg. For the 3 gentlemen that have sisters, possibly are brothers, when the last patriarch passes away, it's like a free pass and there's no referees. And that's when all the plans you read in Successful Farming about a sister that sued brothers and cost her thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but just because the brother didn't have it. That is where the real stress is in trying to manage through that. So the transition between father and son, I think, is a good start. But in my case, where I had land forced to sell against a non-compete or a whatever that clause is, address them issues a little bit, if you would, touch on that.
All right, so we've been pondering this because touched on it briefly, but so now completely out of farming is 2 of my uncles. You know, Dad's in the process of transitioning out. As near as I understand, my one aunt controls. I think I'm going to be very clear here. I think we're trying to nail down all the actual what's going on at the ground, but she will, when Grandma dies, she maybe takes over, and that's right now part of the ground that we farm, plus some of the ground my uncle gave up. And so we were figuring that up one day, that if she decides, say, you know what, I'm going to sell it all because I see the big paycheck. My brother and I took a big gulp because there's no way we can afford that. And so we don't know. I'm waiting for, when that happens, that, all hell will break loose. And we see it coming, and we all think everybody plays nice together. But those of us in that next generation, we realize, oh no, they don't. We see what it's really like, and so we're just waiting for that moment. So there's somewhat of that, that fascination of what's going to happen, but also that we're petrified because we could lose, portions of the ground that we currently farm, and it's going to screw up our whole operation. And that's when we have no idea how to address that yet, because we can't even get to that point yet because we got to get through the first point.
I will say that we were advised, because we have a non-family member or a family member that was not involved in the farming, we were advised to put in the buy-sell agreement that limited who shares could go to. We were also, on another situation, advised that the non-farm assets could be directed to the non-farming sibling, even going to as far as investing in life insurance policies and paying along so that they're small. It's not one big chunk, but you're basically making a small payment so that there's some, because it does become, and I credit, if you have an opportunity to ever hear or listen to Jolene Brown, and her comment is, equal is not fair and fair is not equal. So when you have this, but there's tools that, and if they are put in place, and that's where we've been successful, is we did put in the buy-sell agreement, and we have done the life insurance policies, and we're trying to make it so that it's not going to put the burden on one or two siblings with leftovers, and to do it.
And if I may add, I totally agree with Patty, and I don't know if it is a buy and sell, if it is a trust, but what you have to assume when you think about the future of your business and the transition is that you have your siblings, you have the in-laws, and things get more and more complicated, and relationship change in the time. So you have to assume that if you want the property to stay together, and this is a strong point, you have to put whatever the legal system in the USA or what we did in Italy, we put some rules in order to protect from all this fight, because the legal will kill your business, and there is nothing worse than dividing the control. And again, with the generation, it gets bigger and bigger and more complicated, because the chance somebody will go wrong because it's jealous, because it's unhappy. We're all human beings. So there are so many things. So I think you have to think to some mechanism, as Patty said, that will protect the farm or your business. For me, it's the same business from these events. Otherwise, it will be the joy for the legals, but the desert for you.
I think it's appropriate to mention, Patty said she had that saying from Jolene Brown. There's a song by Corb Lund that's where I believe where Jolene gets that saying. It's called The S Lazy H, and I think everyone should absolutely listen to that song too, because I think it so well lays out the grueling process that a farm or ranch transition can be, because it's just almost exactly the way you described the transition. A daughter who is spending the money and the son can't afford it, and it's incredibly hard, and he's the one who worked it. And I can't say that song. I mean, I don't want to stand up here and talk about one single song, but it affected me so much when I heard it for the first time, and I can't help but see some parallels in almost every farm transition that happens. And I think it's worth everyone in this room to try and take a listen to that.
We've got a couple more questions from the crowd. We're bumping up against ending time for this session, but we're going to keep going until they kick us out of the room.
So, the situation I'm in, I could probably talk here for about a half an hour and tell you, but I'm not going to bore you. But the one thing I will, my dad, he was 47 years older than me, and I farmed with him for 40 years, roughly till 4 or 5 years before he got up into his upper 80s. But the point that I want to make is, and kind of with your dad also, is to get up in the years. We have to transition as sons, not only as partners, but maybe looking out for them too. And as an individual gets older, they age in the natural aging process. Alzheimer's, dementia starts to set in. I was in denial. My wife told me afterwards, she said, "Your dad's got Alzheimer's." Oh, I said, "No, he's just a little forgetful." Well, he did have it. And really, I think maybe God was looking out for us, because transmission went out of the tractor. And I kind of talked to him and says, when was the last time you bought a new tractor? And they said, well, it was 1961. I says, why don't you just go buy a new tractor? Well, that was really a blessing in disguise because it was to the point, Dad, he didn't know how to run it. He couldn't figure it out. I had to put signs on there, just for the shuttle shift to go forward. He was used to an old Dallas-Chalmers D17. It could make it go. But the safety aspect of it is the point that I was wanting to make. As our parents get older, neighbors get older, we need to watch out for them, not only for their safety, but others on the roads. Keep them off the roads, driving cars, trucks. In one instance, Dad, he gave me a ride home, and we have train tracks, and he just blew by it. And I says, Dad, this is a train track. Well, I didn't know there's train tracks here. So be aware of that. I was kind of in denial. I realized that later on. So I'd like to talk with you afterwards just for a little bit.
I do have another question here. I want to make sure and get this in. What advice would each of you have for someone just getting started in this process?
I would suggest to discuss of this when you are younger, because it takes out a lot of emotion. I mean, it's difficult to talk about transition when you are 70, 80 years old. When, like, my father started to talk to me, he was much younger. That's why he challenged me with being the president. So again, I think when you are a little younger, you see the future more far away, and you are also stronger because you are in the best energy you have. So it's more easy to think about a mechanism that can help later the things to happen, while when you do it late, can be much more emotional, much more complicated, and too late for the children. We have decided, for example, to involve the children since they are 16 years old to see what they like. So I think one is timing, the other one, yes, once in your lifetime to set up a value system and a transmission system that you approve, you think it is the most correct, the most responsible for your business, and go through as smoothly as possible, because transition, I don't think is a 6 months, 12 months, unless there is a dramatic situation. It's a long transition. Again, my father, I'm here because my father made a transition with him. So if I exist, it's because of the transition, not only as a children, but as a family company. And this must be well planned.
And I think to add to what Nadia said is when things happen 20 or so years before, it gives you room to make some mistakes and gives you some flexibility, and things don't have to be so rigid. You can absolutely change, so when right, yeah, when situations change, you can change. And I think the best advice is what I said before, and what I think we've all said is the communication and making sure that everyone is on the same page, from generation to generation, and making sure that, and I can't say that things are fair, because I don't think that things are ever fair when it comes to, especially when it's like us. There's 5 of us, and I don't think it could ever be fair. But make sure things are right, and make sure things are set up in a way to where in 30, 40 years that you're having a farm or a ranch to transition again. I think to have this process be repeatable as much as possible.
I think they're both right. Nadia hit the nail on the head. It's never too early to start the conversation, ever. Start it now. If there's somebody, you may find out they may not want to do it. Yeah. That may not be their goal. So start it early, have the conversation early. It doesn't mean you have to do it today, but again, follow the pattern. It's a transition. It's not a hostile takeover. From whether you are because I'm done being the son, my next challenge will be as the parent. And I want my son, if he decides to do that, to be successful. So I want to do things to make him successful. My dad wanted to do things to make me successful. Yes, I have to take care of me, and he has to take care of him. So please, look at the big picture. But when you take time, it gives you retrospect, and it gives you a chance to go home and go, you know what? I thought it this way, but in the last 6 months, I definitely see it. I was wrong. Be able to do that, to come in and go, we got to work this a different direction. What do you think? One of the things that I learned early on was, as a son, is to ask my dad what he thinks. But the one thing my dad did is he asked me what I thought. Mm-hmm. So as a parent, remember that. You don't have to agree with them, but ask them what they think. Communication.
In hindsight, we went through, both myself and my wife, when we were coming back, went through a program in Nebraska called Returning to the Farm. And then same thing with my brother and his wife when they came back. It made me realize that we did a really good job of saying, okay, how are we going to get you into the farm? Then it just kind of stopped. There was never that next stage of, okay, well, let's look at this 20 years down the road, 50 years down the road, whatever the case is. How are mom and dad going to leave the farm? How do you go through that process? So it made me realize that we did a good job of plan A, but plan B just never materialized, even though it's, in my case, you're always thinking about it. Like, okay, so I'm the 5th generation. I'm going to bring back the 6th generation. How are we going to make this work? How are we going to transition this out? And yeah, that conversation probably should have started 15, 20 years ago. And just as a logical conversation, just as a traditional business plan, but we get wrapped in the emotion and the concept of it. It's a family farm, and it's the lifestyle, and it's generational. And we forget about the business aspect and the what happens when.
Just start the conversation and start it with, okay, I want to be cremated. No, I don't want this service. Don't do this, and start with the basics if you're going to. And that's what we've done with our daughters is we've just said, this is what I want. This is what I'm thinking. And for me, and I was telling them at breakfast this morning, one of the things I did after we'd had our 3 girls, I'm married to a dairy farmer, there's 300 cows, and how we did this, it came up, you need an emergency plan. You need a plan that if something happens to a family member or my husband, all right, what are you going to do in the first 24 hours? Then what are you going to do in 48 hours? Then what are you going to do in 2 weeks? And here's the people to call. Well, that conversation ended up being talked about on a regular basis that the daughters started hearing about it. And then when they got to be 16, 17 years old, they started. And we were saying, if something happens to my husband and I, because we're all the time together, then this is who you call. This is what you need to do. Take care of this. Take care of this. This is what you need to do. And it leads into planning beyond 48 hours, beyond 2 weeks. What are you going to do with the farm? What's going to happen? So just starting the conversation with the very basics and the worst case scenario leads into the bigger conversation.
I did have a request, your podcast information, if you would share that.
Yeah, sure. It's called Ag State of Mind. You can find us on the Global Ag Network, or you can find us on anywhere you get podcasts. iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all those places. The website is for people who just want to go to the computer and find it, globalagnetwork.com/ag state of mind with Jason Meadows.
I want to thank you all so much for attending today. We need to keep this conversation going and sharing these thoughts. And, agriculture comes together when there are disasters. When someone can't finish combining their field of corn, everybody rallies in and helps and helps with the emotional aspect of that. This is no different. We need to rally as a community to help one another when it comes to mental health issues. If you'd like to see a recording of this session, please go to the Brownfield Ag News website homepage, brownfieldagnews.com. A special thanks to all of our panelists for being here today, and a special thanks to Sipcam Agro for sponsoring this session because they believe farming is about more than, or it is more. It's our livelihoods. There we go. It's about more than just being a job. You can visit sipcamagrousa.com for more information about them. And finally, there are surveys, I think, for you to complete. I'm not sure where they are. Do you? Okay. Okay. Was this session helpful? And what can we provide you as you navigate the emotional side of succession planning? Thank you.